G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder with Mags. Today we're taking a look at the one-eyed monster, the tank with a cannon so long and fat that even Ron Jeremy would raise an eyebrow. This is the Dicker Max. Coming in at rank 3, battle rating 4.3, this beast packs a whopping 105mm K18 cannon. It comes with 3 ammo options to unload into your enemies. The standard PZGR APHE round is a 14kg armor-piercing shell with 240 grams of explosive at its core, moving at 822 meters per second. It'll drive deep into its target at close range with 144mm of penetration at 10 meters, but loses its ability to get in deep quickly, dropping to only 112mm at 1 kilometer. The second shell of choice, and one that must be unlocked from the second tier of upgrades, is the PZGR Rot. This APCBC shell is a massive 16 kilograms and maintains that same 822 meters per second velocity, but drops to only 210 grams of explosive filler. It makes up for its lack of load with even greater penetration, 202mm at 10 meters and maintaining 177 at 1 kilometer, even managing 158mm all the way out at 2 kilometers. Its final round is a standard HE that tends to be a bit limp, although useful for splashing AAA trucks in the face. So the power of this penetrating pleasure piece is something to behold, but what's the downside? Well, the shells seem to have an unusually high chance to bounce, as seen in this clip. The T-34-1941 bounces a standard PZGR round at around 20 meters. The T-34 only has 45mm of armor on the front, but it raises to roughly 93mm of armor at that angle. In spite of the PZGR round having well over 120mm of pen at that range, the shell bounces off the hull and then bounces off the underside of the mantlet, failing to get a loading. This seems to be a pretty common performance problem with the standard PZGR round, so I recommend upgrading to the PZGR Rot round as quickly as possible. But what about the performance of the rest of the machine? Well, like everything armed with such a lethal weapon, it lacks in other areas. First is the armour, best described as used tissue paper. At around 50mm at the front, 20mm at the sides and rear, there is pretty much nothing in the game that can't drop a load in this tank from any range. Speaking of dropping loads, the second problem is the massive gaping hole the size of a Panzer II over the whole crew compartment. A direct artillery strike in there will likely send you out early. This lack of armour also poses other problems. While the crew itself and the ammunition racks in the tank seem to be surprisingly durable, able to take a massive amount of hits before they finally go out. Any hits to the engine or the gearbox seem to automatically set the tank on fire every single time, including hits from small caliber machine guns mounted to the top of tanks rather than just the main gun. What also gets annoying is the gun breech itself. It is regularly destroyed due to its incredibly large size. I actually have had shells impact the tracks outside of the tank, and a single shard or fragment has broken away from the shell, penetrated the side armour of the tank, and managed to hit the breech, taking the breech out. As a result, taking an impact at any location on the tank not only runs the risk of impeding tank mobility, but also of actually disabling the weapon system, even if the shell appears to strike a part of the tank that should in no way interfere with the weapon system. Which segues nicely into mobility, the area of performance that this tank does not stand up to. First, let's talk about gun traverse. With a field of fire only 10 degrees wide, Max's massive metal member requires a lot of hull movement to get on target. However, it will raise itself tall to the tune of 10 degrees as well, which isn't bad for a tank destroyer. More impressively is its cannon depression of 15 degrees. I believe that's one of the highest in the game for a tank destroyer, allowing Max to shoot over ridge lines and down hills comfortably without having to expose itself to the enemy. However, that's really the last of the good news. The Fat Max comes in at 22 tons and is not a small target. That weight, coupled with its pitiful 160 horsepower engine, gives it a top speed of only 28 kilometers an hour stock, or just over 30 fully upgraded, so you won't be getting anywhere fast. This large size and weight also impedes hull traverse. The limited hull movement, coupled with the limited gun traverse on the horizontal, means getting your weapon on target quickly will always be an issue. So in the end, what does all this amount to? Well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, the Dicker Max is best played defensively, putting it into a position where it's not going to take hits, but it can openly fire at enemy. A high pass where enemy tanks will be cruising past on a fairly regular basis is ideal. Unfortunately, those positions are fairly rare in War Thunder's maps, with the maps more being designed around an assault setup. Now, you can most certainly assault in the Dicker Max, it's actually the way I prefer to play it, but its limited mobility means you have to pick where you're going to go very carefully, as it's highly unlikely you are going to be able to rapidly change from one side of the map to the other if your team suddenly needs you there. And this is the main reason why you'll notice the background of this particular review is all short clips. Now, this has just been my finding with the Dickermax so far. Because I play an assault, I tend to have a lot of action in a very short burst, where I'll get 1, 2, 3 tank kills in a row, and then unless I happen to be particularly lucky and have more tanks come in my direction, that's it. I may not see any more combat for the rest of the game. I just sit around with a thumb up my ass because I just cannot get to where the rest of the tanks are fast enough. Or I run into matches where you get teamed with a large number of fast movers, say when Germany fights with Russia against Britain and the United States, and you happen to be on a team that has a high amount of T-34s. They will tend to kill everything more quickly than you can even get to the zone to fire the gun. On those matches, it's very rare you die, but it's also very rare that you even get to fire your gun. And then there of course are the very bad picks, when you happen to pick the side that the enemy has chosen to move on, which would be great if they didn't all come at you at once. And the Dickermax's almost 15-second long reload time, even with a skilled crew, suddenly causes some major issues there, where you can usually kill one and you'll usually be able to armor and protect yourself enough by getting behind a rock or some kind of cover in order to get a second shot out and maybe take out a second tank. By then the enemy knows where you are, they've flanked you, and at that point, as I said, one shot into the engine or gearbox generally sets this thing on fire. Any penetrating hit or explosive hit anywhere on the hull has a tendency to take out the gun breech. Once those have happened, you're out. So ladies and gents, that is the Fat Max, the Dickermax itself. I really do like this tank. I've been having a great time driving it around. I'm aware that it does have a lot of problems. However, if you know what those problems are, it's fairly easy to drive the tank in a manner where it's not going to cause you too much of an issue. When I first started driving this thing, death was fairly common. I tend to die fairly rarely in this tank now, but I do find myself in situations where I've killed everything in my area and simply am not able to cross the map to get to the other side, unless you happen to get on one of those tiny little small arcade matches, which normally German tanks don't like, as they're usually both extremely small in size and extremely hilly, which are two things that don't really work well with the majority of German armor available in War Thunder. However, it happens to be two things that the Dickermax likes very much. With its extremely powerful high explosive shells, capable of extremely high amounts of penetration at short range, and its insanely high level of gun depression, allowing it to actually shoot down those hills and use the ridges on those maps effectively, well, I suppose the best way to say it is I see a lot of vehicles added to War Thunder every single patch, and I think, you know, in a couple of weeks' time, how many of those vehicles are still going to be used, because they just don't fit into the meta. They're not very effective at what they do. Once the shine wears off, these vehicles are likely not going to be seen, or seen very rarely ever again. In the case of the Dickermax, I think this tank actually fits Germany's meta very well at the moment, especially in the area of 3.3 to 5.3, which it will be facing. And I think its gun is incredible, especially once you unlock that second shell, which I fully recommend grind to that shell as fast as you can if you're playing around with this tank. It just changes the way the machine operates. I don't think the Dickermax is going to be disappearing from the battlefield anytime soon. In fact, I think just about everybody all the way up to probably 5.3 battle rating will have a Dickermax in their line somewhere as a backup vehicle, or maybe even beyond. I know my H1 Tiger line, which is 5.7, I've already slotted the Dickermax in as an extra vehicle for a cheap tank destroyer deploy on the off chance that I lose the Tiger and I don't have enough points for the Panther. So yeah, I think this one is going to be around for a little while. Anyways, ladies and gents, thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more. Drive smart, drive safe, and I'll catch you on the battlefield.